Now this one's a little bit nicer because I'm starting off with something that's to the third power instead of the fourth power, so I only have to go down one level to make it squared. That's nice. But still, I'm not given any zeros, so we get to try them out. The other nice thing is the coefficient of my cubic is 1, so whenever I go through here and I do my p divided by q, my p is the number in the back, my q is the number in the front, so it's always back divided by front. So I come up with my p values, and I have plus or minus 1, 2, 5, plus or minus, and a 10. My q values are simply plus and minus 1. So whenever I go through and I divide these out, basically, anytime I take my p, divide it by 1, those are my p divided by q values. So this one is nice. So 1, 2, 5, and 10. This one's nice and easy for us. So this would be a good one for you to potentially practice. So you may want to hit pause, practice this, see if you can come up with it, and then come back and we'll work it together. Okay, so let's check this out then. We try them on. So remember, it's usually a 1 or negative 1, so I'm going to try 1 first. And I have 1, negative 2, negative 13, and negative 10 are my coefficients. Drop down that 1. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. That gives me a negative 14. So I have negative 14. That's obviously not working. So let's try negative 1 and see if that works for us. So I now have 1, negative 2, negative 13, and negative 10 still. Drop down that 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. So I have negative 3. So then that's going to give me a positive 3. And that'll be negative 10, positive 10, and a 0. Da-da-da-da-da-da! Negative 1 is the key. Which is cool because now we have this as our coefficients of x squared minus 3x minus 10. I'm going to bring that on up here. X squared minus 3x minus 10. Now factor that. And I get x minus 5 and an x plus 2. And then don't forget, I also want to have my third factor over here as an x plus 1, because anything next to the x is opposite, so don't forget about that. So anytime I have this and it's next to the x, and that's going to be opposite. Try to make that one a little more obvious. There's my factors. Now I want to have the zeros. So remember, they're exact same thing, but here the 0 is going to be a 5, a negative 2, and a negative 1. So we now have our zeros and we have our factors because they're the same thing, just in a different form. Great. Nice job. The last thing I want to talk about here are multiplicities and zeros. Now remember, a 0 is by the factor. The difference on this problem is here I have an exponent of 3 and an exponent of 2. The deal with multiplicities is anytime you have an even exponent, that's an even multiplicity. So anytime you have that even exponent, this means it's just going to touch that x-axis. So it touches and bounces off an even exponent. If you have an odd exponent, that means it's going to go through that x-axis. So an even exponent touches, and the multiplicity is just named by the exponent. So this would be a multiplicity of 3, and I know at that 0 it's going through the x-axis. This is a multiplicity of 2, where it just touches that x-axis. So this is what I want you to do. When you go through and you're working these problems, you're going to split this up. Everything that's multiplied is what you're looking at separately. For that 3x, whenever I'm looking at the multiplicity right here of this 3x, you're setting each one equal to 0. So if I have 3x is equal to 0, x is simply 0. So at 0, we have a multiplicity of 1, and this goes through that x-axis. That's just something that I want you to know and think about, because that's going to help us whenever we graph polynomials. Cool. Now look at this other one. My second one here, if I set this x minus 2 equals to 0, then I got x equals 2. That is my 0. It is a multiplicity of 3. And this is also, because it's odd, is going to go through that x-axis. Last but certainly not least, I'll do a nice long arrow here. I have this x plus 4 is equal to 0, so x is a negative 4. This is a multiplicity of 2, because that's my exponent. And this one, however, is just going to touch that x-axis. And again, the purpose with the touching or the going through the x-axis is going to help us whenever we graph polynomials. Not necessarily something your homework's going to ask this time. Awesome. Started on that homework.